Got another cinematography breakdown of Netflix's Ripley. Today I'm focusing on how they are treating faces and highlights within the series. Now there is a subsection of this which we're going to touch on a little bit at the end, and I think I'm going to do another video on it which talks about the art influence, the Caravaggio, the light, all of that sort of stuff. But I think that it's fair enough to have it in a separate video, because otherwise I'll just talk for ages and ages and ages, and I'll just wander off on tangents. So going to keep it focused. This is what we have today. Got a whole spread of different scenarios with different characters in different environments, and I'm going to look at how they're lighting them. So to start off, oh, by the way, massive spoiler alert, obviously, this is going to be looking at characters who may not be in the first episode, and also when we get to the end, we're going to be talking about things just because of what's going on and why it's going on. So yeah, you've been warned. If you haven't watched the whole series, go and watch it and then check back on this one, because I will just be talking and I might have spoilers in there. Well, the first frame that we have just here is our inspector, tenacious fellow that he is. And I'm just going to call out a couple of things that are going on with the lighting. It's all basic stuff, but, you know, I enjoy watching things where people just call things out and I kind of just agree with them and go, yeah, that's definitely what they're doing. So to start with, if you're very new to lighting faces and analysing where and why light is on them. So here, the big giveaway is the shadow for our inspector, which is all across here, and you can see this line coming across there like that. Now that kind of tells you where the light is coming from, because in order to cast that line down, it's got to be coming from somewhere up here. Now exactly where and how far around, you can tell by a couple of other things. So for example, looking at his face, his eye sockets and his nose, that starts to tell you how far around the light actually was. So we know that it's up above him, we know it's pointing probably down towards him, and then how far around, we're just looking at how much shadowing on the nose there is. And then also, by virtue of the fact that your face kind of goes back like that, how much shadowing we have down the side of his face just here as well. It isn't quite as easy to gauge accurately these things, because all sorts of other factors might come into play when you're looking at this. So for example, there might be a relatively large amount of fill in the room, and that might be lifting it. It might be that there's more than one light source. People have different shaped faces, so obviously that's going to influence how the light lands and how it renders. But more or less, I think from this, we can say with a reasonable amount of accuracy that the light is sort of off, up, just far enough around that we're getting the shadowing across the closest side of his face, and then we're still managing to get the catch light in his eyes just there. So if we, in fact, I'll zoom in, see the catch light in the top quadrant. That's another dead giveaway for where the light is positioned, looking to see in people's eyeballs where you actually seeing that. Now there's usually more than one light source visible in people's eyes, depending on the location. Now obviously when you're filming things, you're tending to control the light, and therefore you might have more unified sources, or you might be trying to blend one source across. But we can see other things going on in his eye here. It's not mega obvious, but if you look at the bottom of his eye, I don't think I can draw a line fine enough. No, I definitely can't draw a line fine enough. Let's go finer than that. Yeah, just along the bottom there, around here. You can see it in the other eye as well. You're seeing a little bit of bounce, which in all likelihood is the desk and anything that's on the desk. Now, I'm not really suggesting that they're using that as a super active stroke, but you do find that in a lot of things, actually, people will, when they have a two-shot of people at the table and it's pretty wide and you just want people to be able to come in, sit down, maybe it's started from a wider shot tracking in or something like that, bouncing the light off a white tablecloth or some papers that are on the desk or a menu that's being held in someone's hand. That's a way that people actually do light, just bouncing the light off whatever surface is there. Now that I don't think is the case here at all, but it's certainly there and it's playing a part. Not a big part, but it's playing a part. Really quick other things to call out. We have a little bit of vignetting going on around him. So all around him just there, you can see that vignette blooming off. I would say that that is because the light is focused on him and it's hitting the back wall a bit and then it's just dispersing away to a much lower level by the time we get out to here. So yeah, that helps to draw the eye. Also, on top of that, we have this structure in the background helping to create a little bit of contrast and variation in the back. So that wood paneling is, I mean, it's period correct, so there's that. But also, it helps to make the frame more interesting. If that was just a white wall, then the frame wouldn't feel quite as interesting. We do have other things up in the top just there, around here. Netflix logo there, obviously. But yeah, in general, it's just a nicely constructed frame. We've got the eye light really popping in his eye. He is lit from the far side, so he's down to camera, which is always a good thing. And, well, I say it's always a good thing. That's not necessarily always a good thing. It is a very tried and tested way of lighting a face, and it works. So a lot of people do it, and it is viewed as a proper approach to lighting faces, but it isn't the only one. All right, we're going to jump into the reverse. We're looking at Marge now. She is getting a little bit of a harder time here than she has done throughout most of the first half of the series, I'd say. And the lighting, I feel, is also reflecting that. So she is getting a harder light than she normally would, and it's really hot all down this side of her face, to the point of, on this screen at least, feeling like it's starting to blow out a little bit or bloom out a little bit. On the shadow side, she is relatively down, I have to say. And that also gives us a nice shape down her cheek and around her eye socket. In fact, if you look in a little bit on the eye socket just there, you can see this little flick of shadow across. I suspect that is from an eyelash or something. So it tells you a little bit, again, about how big or large or far away the light source was from her. So when I say big, large, far away, if a light source is very, very close to you, a comparatively small light source is effectively soft. You get dramatic fall off then from just the short distances. But in order to get the same softness as an A4 sheet of paper just here, you have to have an enormous 20 by 20 sized source 5 meters away or something like that. Basically, a little rule of thumb for it is if you can cover the light source that's far away with a piece of paper, you just kind of go until the whole thing's covered, you will get more or less an equivalent level of softness, if that makes sense. So what is a much smaller source is in fact as soft. All kinds of other things start to take effect at that point. And I suppose the arch example of this would be the sun is probably the largest light source, the biggest source that we have in our solar system, probably, definitely. But it's so far away that it is effectively tiny. It is a pinprick. It is a point source. It casts very hard shadows unless it is diffusing through cloud or bouncing off something. So yeah, that gives you a little bit of a sense of what I'm talking about, hopefully. She does have the eye light pinging in her eye. Again, same as before, it is in that top quadrant of her eye, telling us that the light is somewhere up here, pointing down at her, and it's doing a good job of illuminating her face in a slightly hard way. You can see just around here, all of her furrowed brow is actually getting variation of tonality and shade, and we've got a relatively hard nose shadow just here as well. So all of this going across, coming down from her nose. It's not mega hard, but it's fairly hard. Same things in the background are happening as well. So we've got this cutting across, we've got a general level of stuff, but she's by far and away the brightest element within the scene. Interesting, no practical sources or anything like that just here. It is just the light on her. Now I've got a comparison because I did say that she's getting a harder light than she normally does. This is Marge in more ideal circumstances, in happier times, in her lovely little apartment in the lovely little village they live in. Tons of character development that I'm spilling just here. So it is a way softer light, motivated from a window that we're going to assume is on this side of frame just here, just slightly further outside a shot. And then we have the other window in the background just there, and that is creating this lovely little edge down there. Also, we get some nice little hot spots and, you know, brighter areas. We've got the sky just there. It's still got some definition of like a mountain in the background and some dappling and things. The light plays across the scene, but nothing is super dark. I mean, the darkest bit is just in the corner with these bits of, you know, furniture and stuff. We do have texture in the wall, which is interesting to look at just there. Gives the whole thing a little bit more life, makes it feel almost like a canvas, you know, going back to the whole painting theme of the show. You've got variation of texture. Now, most people trying to make their tiny rooms in short films feel good, stuck with white walls, that uniform tone, and then even if you push light across it and create a variation of shade, like a gradient or something, you don't get this same sort of dappling effect of just texture and depth. And yeah, it's kind of cool. Bit of light catching on the bed. She is getting an eye light in there, but it's a slightly odd shaped eye light. I have not seen too many eye lights where they're actually making an effort with it, where it isn't perfectly round. So this one is notable because it is kind of long. It feels like, it doesn't feel like a tube necessarily because they tend to be way slimmer, but maybe something like a softbox, or maybe they're bouncing a bit of light off a bit of card or you know, the ceiling or something like that. So yeah, that, and you got a tiny little catch in this side only, which is possibly a little bounce coming in on this side to fill in, or maybe it's just something that's happening with you know, general level, just bouncing off something and, you know, catching in our eye. It can happen. Way more flattering light than in this scene, and you can tell the difference between the two instantly. Her hair is in a ponytail still. In this one it's up a little bit more, so it just feels a little bit different in that respect. But I think just comparing softness and the effect on her face, and how her face in this shot looks kind of round and gentle and soft, and in this shot everything's just thinned down a little bit and it's more focused on just the features in the center, and then the other things are either obscured because we're not looking on that side, or put off to shadow, so it just carves it out a little bit more. Interesting to see those two next to each other. Okay, I've been talking for a few minutes now and we haven't looked at the titular character, so let's have a look at something with Tom in. Eye lights are plenty here. We have a really defined eye light just there, and for all I just said, you know, they tend to go with round ones. This one does look a little bit square, just in his eye here, and there's something a little bit further round as well in this eye that we're not getting in this one. So yeah, those eye lights do really ping. That feels like it's a source off to the surprise, this side just here, and it's probably higher than I've drawn it, but not super high, because again, we can see a reasonable amount of light getting in under his chin just here. We're not seeing any crazy lines of shadow going down like that. So I would say that it's definitely not as high as it was for either of the characters in the previous scenes. Then we have a couple of other things to call out, because he is kind of down there, but it's mostly down around his nose. And then there's a few practicals in the background. Don't know whether they're actually lamps. I think they are, because I think there are people working in the back just there. But this lamp just here that you can't see because I'm covering it, which is just where I am, is... can I do that? Yeah, there you go. That lamp just there is not on. It is not actually a practical in the shot. It's a practical light that is in the shot, but it's not turned on. So aside from that, I'm not really seeing too much else to call out with this. It's nicely lit. He is zinging pretty hot on that side. I mean, when you compare the level of his skin to the level of the lights in the background, and I do find this quite a lot in this show, often the characters are one of the brightest things in the frame. Not always, but quite a lot of the time. There's some nice... We've got some nice little things of like out of focusness across the desk just here. There's all of that, I don't know what you'd call it, just miasma of things, character, whatever, to tell us a little bit about Mr. Greenleaf Senior across there. There's quite a lot of structure in the background of the shot, but we're not really focused on that. It's more about the faces and the way people are lit for this. I pulled this frame out with Thomas in the bank, and I think the reason I did it was she's getting a very soft, flattering, high-key light. And there's also a frame within a frame, which we're not talking about today, but I'll just mention it. So we've got this obvious frame just here. You know, she's there, bing, she's in a painting. And there's a lot of fun little kicks of light and dappling happening through these windows in the back. She is getting a rather beautiful hair light just cutting her out there. That is also falling on Tom just here. But everyone is pretty evenly lit. There's not a massive amount of variation between her face and the back of his head just there, because normally, I don't know, you might be playing him quite down, but the whole environment here is actually softly lit, gently lit, and then there's a few dapples and things, and most of the variation is happening with structures and, yeah, this thing dividing the two of them. So that's kind of cool. A little bit different from the other things that we've looked at. I love this shot. It is crunchy as anything. So we've got few things that we can call out with this. Obviously, looking at the shadow, first of all, the side of Tom's face is super, 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 super dark. That is crunched right down. Our gentleman just here is getting a good amount of shadowing across the center of his face, and his light just in the back here is sort of motivated a little bit to be from whatever's going on with these windows just here. So just catching in like that, and then whatever's coming from behind over here is just catching him there. But it keeps him as this vague mystery man with his hat on, and his hat also is a factor in this. You know, it's kind of shading his face even further and creating this extended silhouette for him, where he has this really, you know, stark. I guess it's almost like a character like Darth Vader. They have a really recognizable silhouette. So him having this dark hat on just helps to cement him in our brains. He's not a pivotal character, but he does come in later on. So yeah, interesting scene with the hat just there. And we've got pretty bright light on Tom. We're not catching too much of his second eye. We just see his eyelashes kicking around his nose just there. But the light itself also isn't crazy far around. So you can see this whole area that we got just here. You're able to make out a lot of detail within his eye socket just there. So that means that the light isn't super duper high, or at least if they're using a highlight, it's not the only one. It's probably quite a lot lower down. And in fact, if you look at some of the shadowing just here around his nose and things, you can kind of get a feel of where that angle would be. So I'm feeling it sort of coming from this sort of height up here and booking down into his face. And it's managing just to peek something into his eyes just there. And there's a couple of other things that you can see in that eye, but it's so far around you're not really noticing it as much at all. For this whole scene as well, Tom is played very impassive. He's very brooding, and he doesn't really engage too much with what's going on around him. He's just got that stare and those little twinkles in his eye, which is cool. Okay, this looking at paintings, and you got that much flatter light across the whole of his face just there. Basically one tone of skin, and that's it. You get a little bit of shadow just under his chin, but the whole of his face is pretty much unified, except for this light, which is just creating this hot edge down here and all around there. Now, exactly, now that is also playing across his jacket just there. And it's interesting to compare this to some of the other things where we're using shadows to create separation and shaping. Here we're using the light to create that separation and shaping with highlights, rather than by using it to crunch down the shadows, if that makes sense. You're always using light one way or another, subtracting it or adding it, but here it's an additive thing, and it's just zinging the side of his face, and you're getting it all the way across his skin as well. So it's not just that edge. We've got a little kick just over his brow just there. And it's that effect that you get when you fire light at a very shallow angle towards skin, and it kind of pings through it. It gives you a shiny, translucent look, where you're just really seeing the reflection of the light source through the layers of the skin and the oils in the skin. That's what's doing it. So yeah, that one's very different. Obvious eye light just here, and because his head is tilted back, the eye light is sitting lower within his eyes just there. It's pretty much dead center on pupil in that one almost. And although that is probably one of the lights which is illuminating him, it doesn't have to be the one which is actually doing the work particularly. The thing about eye lights is, and I would say that in this series I don't feel that this is necessarily the case, because the eye lights are so pronounced. But when you have a reflective shiny surface, if you have a light, even if it's a very low level compared to all of the other lights in the room, it could be relatively low level, you will still see that in the shiny reflective surface, and the eye is that shiny reflective surface. So essentially you can have a eye light at a lower level further away, and it doesn't have to do the heavy lifting of actually lighting the face. And in fact, in some cases it's preferable that it does not, because you want to have more control over how your scene is lit. But just having that eye light flexible to move around can really help you to keep it consistent throughout the whole thing. This one's fun because he's sort of underlit. It reminds me of like those old, like old Frankenstein film or something, with the mad scientist, and it just looks a little bit ominous and menacing. Similar kind of things going on. We've got eye light, we've got a practical source over there as well, but yeah, just one to call out. Inspector, again, he is lit very, very moody, and I will call this out probably a few more times even. He isn't sitting next to any lights. There's no practicals in the back of shot. A lot of the time in this, we are led to believe the light is coming from a window or something that we're not seeing outside a frame. He is getting lit, again, probably not as high as he has been before, somewhere off here, and that is lighting him down there. He's got a relatively large amount of fill on his nose, so I'm thinking this is slightly edged further round than maybe we have seen him in some of the previous shots, but he's still got this wicked downside just here. It's really crunched down, so maybe they got some negative fill and they're bringing that in. He does have light coming in at the back as well, and there's stuff going on in the room here, so we feel that's justified. And you can kind of tell a little bit the levels that they're dealing with, because the lighter isn't going to particularly play on anything really. It's not like it's illuminating the scene, so you know they're pumping a reasonable amount of level into a scene like this. They're not relying on a sensitive camera or a fast lens. They're actually pushing a fair amount of light. It doesn't have to be tons, but a fair amount just into the scene just there. Highlights, very dramatic look on him. We've got cool stuff in the back just there with all of these little bits of bokeh with the glasses and things. But yeah, very simple, very elegant. Love it. This is cool because it is mostly just that sheen that we talked about a moment ago through his skin. So a light source hitting from a shallow angle and just glancing through the skin of his face just here. And we just got this highlight, and you can kind of see the imperfections in the skin and the pores and all the rest of it. And then quite a down section. Not entirely down, and in fact there's a reasonable amount of shadowing around here. So yeah, but a very moody, dramatic look, and lots of dappled sections of things in the background. But again, his skin is one of the brighter things in shot, save this thing just over here. So yeah, not seeing tons of practicals. Very nice because of all of the light shafts coming through. A bit of a different look from most other things that we have seen within the series. So, you know, light screaming in like this. You've got all of the little dust motes, which is always fun. Heavily motivated from that window, clearly, and it works beautifully. She's pretty hot down this side, but has a good amount of fill. So the whole of this side of her face is actually really pretty high in level. And if we look at the decor and everything in the room, it's not like it's a really bright white room. The wall's very close to her. It's a big room, and it's kind of dark with lots of things that are going to bounce the light around and not just bounce it back to her. You know, it's not a completely flat, even bounce surface. It's all kinds of picture frames and whatnot, and quite dark wood. And yeah, so they're going to have something in here like a big bounce just to fill her in. So, you know, that's off to the side just here. And it does seem to be creeping under her chin a reasonable amount as well, which makes me think it's not super high up. It's kind of, you know, down more at her level. Still big, still probably taller than her. And the key with this is to make it feel natural, that it isn't just a small thing brought in just to push some light back into her up close. It's a much more global stroke, something big, soft, that it won't make itself known as she moves around. You know, it just beds into the natural tone of the room. So yeah, a little bit different, having that shaft of light coming through and using that to kind of reveal this this plot point, this clue, and also create that contrast of light down the side of her face. And the rest of the room, again, pretty dark. And that's interesting because obviously if you're looking at this and thinking, well, you know, she's pretty bright, she wouldn't be realistically. The room itself in the back just here and even over here, and it's so far down, there's no reason for her to be that bright. And yeah, a little bit different. Move on. Super quick on this one now because I've probably been talking for ages and my voice is starting to sound a little bit husky. So, Tom as, spoiler, Dickie Richard Greenleaf just here. What I want to point out with this, and it'll become relevant in a moment, is that he is very front lit, very bright, very happy. I maybe wouldn't go so far as to call this a really high key shot, but you can see that there's just light pinging into him. Pretty much bang, flat, level, just there. We're not getting a massive amount of shadowing under his chin, which tells us a little bit about the elevation of that light. It is biased to sort of this side, just, but only just. And then on the other side of his face, we do get a fair amount of fall off fairly quickly, which means it's probably a smaller source, not sort of like a massive, big, I don't know, 12 by 12 sitting in that room. It feels smaller, and a couple of things do give that away a bit as well. The shadows that we can see on these lamps in the background and this door just here, they're all quite hard and they're all quite definite. So I think with a massive source spread across the whole back of the room there, you wouldn't be getting that. And also the eye light is pretty pingy in those eyes as well. So we're not seeing, I mean, if you look at my glasses now, you see that haze across them. I'm looking at the screen to see how it's happening. That's because I've got a pretty big softbox just here, and it will just bloom across the whole thing. Whereas, will this work? I'm not going to be able to see it. Yeah, you can kind of see there we are. That's a small source going across my glasses just there. At a similar distance, obviously not quite as far, but you can make a small source out in that reflective surface much more clearly than you can a big ambient source. So that's what makes me think this is a smaller source on him just here. Now, he looks youthful, his hair is back, his shirt's undone, he's clean shaven, he's smiling, he's got this light pinging in his eyes. And the reason this is relevant is later in the film, he has to have a meeting with the same, spoiler, detective as he did before, as Richard Greenleaf before, but now he's actually being himself. He is being Thomas Ripley. So there's this whole sequence where he has the epiphany of, it's all about the light. So this has been referenced with the Caravaggios, and he just goes around the room and he lets down all of the curtains, and then he goes over to the lamps and he's bought some bulbs, some smaller bulbs to use in the lamps that are near him. And he screws that in, takes the old one out, and then he sits there and he pushes the light further around, further away. So he's casting, I'm just going to draw on this one, he's casting a larger shadow area across this side of his face. So he's almost occluding the entire side of his face just here. And then he's already made it so that the bulb is a lower level, lower intensity. This is just like going into a room and trying to light it. It's cinematography. So then this side of his face is lit, but it's down. Even the curtains in the back just here are brighter than his face is. Now we do still get a little bit of a catch light in his eye just here. This one, I reckon, is actually from the lamp that's just there that he's moving around. The other one, harder to say. I think that is probably one of the lights they're using to illuminate the scene. I don't think it's one of the windows. But yeah, that lamp obviously isn't present in this eye because he has on purpose moved it around so that it can't see that eye. The lamp is further around than it. So yeah, wonderful little bit of cinematic manipulation going on just here. So we have a pretty dark wall behind him, but that still leaves enough that you can see his silhouette. Obviously the lamp now, one of the very few times that we have a practical in shot in the whole thing, and it is bright. That compared to him is a way hotter source, but it's not blown out or anything, but it's just pinging there in the corner of the frame and as he moves it across. And then if we look at next scene, we see the inspector interviewing him, not interrogating, just interviewing him. And he is lit more brightly, he's getting more light on him. He does have a lamp as well, actually, which is just here, which has obviously a more intense bulb in. So we're led to believe this light will be lighting him to a higher level. So yeah, that is true. He is definitely brighter than Thomas is. The light is also wrapping around an unrealistic amount, I probably feel, just there, but that would have been finagled. We have another light in the background. We've got some blooming out onto the wall just here. But we do have a lot of depth in this shot, a lot of variation as well. You know, we've got all of this stuff going on, and we're seeing other things, other forms, you know, throughout the scene just there. And it kind of tells you a little bit about what the inspector's experiencing. You know, he's got this bright light next to him. He's quite well lit. The curtains behind Thomas are a little bit brighter than he is. He still has a downside and whatnot, so yeah, that is still down, and he still has that eye light pinging in. But when we go to the next shot, we'll see what he's seeing. From the distance he's seeing it. I quite like that they did it like this. It's not exactly his point of view, but it's from far enough away that you look at it, and if you were actually sitting there, actually experiencing this scene at this range, you know, the distance between the two characters there, sometimes the cinematic process, the filmmaking process, will give you a distorted idea of what the characters could actually ascertain in that scenario. So if we cut into tight close-ups and we're really looking and scrutinizing Thomas with his fake beard that he's added on and the hair and, you know, the light, we'll be able to go, well, no, yes, of course it's the same person. But we're being forced to understand here that actually it's not. It's a much harder thing to do with your eyes at that distance away from the subject. Now, I'd actually forgotten this is at night, so again, it's probably even more down than it was in the day. We've got this acting as the motivating source for Thomas just there. There's some cool stuff going on at the back just here, which is probably added in post. And you can see on his face, if we do zoom in, he's got the catchlight just here, and it maybe just barely is twinkling in that eye as well, but just barely. I would say that actually in this scene, compared to the previous shot, he is a little bit more up on his fill side than he was in the previous shot where he was testing things out, which is interesting. Maybe they did it just so that we don't lose the side of him completely to the background. But yes, it's a fascinating little game they've played just there with kind of what we would do with our lights on a daily basis. You know, if you're lighting people, you're moving the light around, you're seeing what it does to their face, you're seeing how it changes the structure, whether you can see it in their eyes. And one of the hardest things, lest we forget, with eye lights is getting it into both eyes, getting it at the right level, and not having the eye light, which often, if you're trying to do it, it'll be a small light source. Yeah, you might wang something like this on top of your camera and use that as an eye light, and you have to be very careful not to overpower your key light, which is giving you the nice light. You know, you don't want to have just a tiny little pinprick source lighting your scene for you necessarily. You want to be able to control the eye light, but you don't want to overpower your key light. So what they managed to do in this, I think, is quite elegantly keep a consistent theme, a consistent aesthetic with the eye lights really featuring, and make sure that it helps from a storytelling point of view when we get to a bit like this, you know, when he is manipulating that light and trying to make it feel like he is a different person. Everything that they've done up to that point has supported that. The lighting has supported that. So anything you might criticize earlier on, we're going, this is a bit flat, this is a bit, well, this is why when we get to this point, and they haven't met at night, and he's in control of the environment, he is able to pull off that manipulation. So it's cool. I enjoyed that bit. The whole show is fascinating to look at aesthetically, and we can overanalyze anything to the nth degree. I feel like the last episode was great, and there were wonderful moments. The runtime of it, I struggle with a bit. Maybe this should be for another video. If you've got any questions, drop them down below. If you've got any requests for things you would like to see broken down, drop them down below as well. And check out some of the other videos that I've done on the cinematography in Ripley.